gave a talk this morning on the Great Miami.
appreciate you all being here tonight. Everybody who's here in person, thank you all so much for joining us again for our annual State of the Mill Creek Address. I will start by telling you how grateful I am for each and every one of you for all that you have done for the Mill Creek and for the Mill Creek Alliance over the years. You're going to hear a lot of really good news tonight, and none of that would be possible without your help and your support. We are deeply grateful. We could not do what we do. We could not have achieved everything that we have achieved over the last 25 years without all of you. So thank you very much. To those who may not have met me, I'm Dave Schmidt. I'm the Executive Director of Mill Creek Alliance, and I have the best job in the world, mainly because of the people I work with. You know, I get to be the figurehead and stand up here and talk a lot, but they're the ones who are really out there in the field doing the work day in and day out. So I want to recognize them right off the bat. A lot of our, I think all of our staff is present tonight in one form or another. I want to recognize Linda Keller, who you may not be able to see. There she is. She's waving up on the screen. Linda is the real brains of the operation. She keeps the place from crashing and burning on a daily basis. She's not here with us tonight in person because, unfortunately, she has COVID. So she is helping us out from afar. Bennett Kotler, our project manager, is there in the back at the table with the T-shirts. Bennett manages all of our stream restoration work and many other projects. You know, all of the Lowhead Dam restorations, the floodplain and wetlands restoration projects we do. Bennett is the man who makes sure that that all happens and gets done right. Audra Roberts is right there in the T-shirt, and those of you who are involved in the water quality monitoring program already know Audra, I'm sure. But Audra joined us just about a year ago and is running the water quality monitoring program and doing amazing things. And last but certainly not least of our paid staff, Johnny Dwyer over there with the camera around his neck. Johnny is also sort of a jack of all trades and a master of many. He runs our education programs and directs those. He directs all of our social media and is also sort of our camp photographer. He's an amazing photographer. He gets all the great pictures of wildlife and of the stream that you guys see on social media. I'd also like to recognize our interns. We have several of our interns here tonight. And again, we couldn't do all that we do with a slim staff without the help of the interns. They do an amazing job. So you can wave as I call your name. Elise Monson, right over here with the registration table. Aaliyah Mann, also at the registration table. Caitlin Robinson, back there by the lights. And John Roebker is here somewhere. There's John, there in the back. You know, we always have a great bunch of interns at Mill Creek Alliance, and they are invaluable, and they do meaningful work. So thank you to all of them. Okay, now that the thanks are out of the way, let's get going with the program. The first thing I'd like to do is to thank Gorman Heritage Farm, who is hosting us here tonight at their amazing new facility that they co-own with iSpace, that they just moved into, I think, a little over a year ago, maybe themselves. And they are also an amazing partner. We work on many projects together, consult on grant applications, and they have been good to us. We have a water quality monitoring site right here on the farm. So I would like to invite Nicole Gunderman, the Executive Director, and her colleague Amanda Hanger up to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Dave. As you said, I'm Nicole Gunderman. I am the Executive Director here at Gorman Heritage Farm. And I know it doesn't seem like you're at a farm right now. You're in a former UAW hall. But we had the great opportunity to purchase this building with our partners, as Dave said, iSpace, and utilize the space here so close to the farm to expand our education space. So we're really excited about this, the newest acquisition of the farm. If you haven't been there, if you keep going up the drive here, we have a 122-acre working farm right here, right next door. So I invite you to come. We are a nonprofit. We have a mission to educate about agriculture and nutrition and sustainability and the environment. And so we take that very seriously. There are lots of ways you can get engaged with us at the farm. Visit, volunteer, come to a program or a class, come to an event. But we take that sustainability and environment piece really seriously, partnering with fantastic organizations like the Mill Creek Alliance. We actually just on Monday broke ground on our H2 Ohio River Basin wetland project, which will improve our water or enhance our watershed and improve water quality. So that's one example of our commitment to stewardship. And then another is we have a comprehensive land management plan, and part of that is adding a position as a crop and land steward. So I'd like to introduce Amanda Hanger, our crop and land steward, who is a fantastic addition to our team.
Hello. Ooh. Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, my name's Amanda Hanger. I'm the crop and land steward here at Gorman Heritage Farm. And last year was also my very first year as a Mill Creek Alliance water sampling volunteer. So I had a wonderful experience. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. And part of the reason why I am so thankful for that partnership is because I know, at least in my job personally, what I do has a really large effect on the quality of water entering our watershed, as managing our row crop production. And I am super glad to say that in the past few years, Gorman Heritage Farm has made a really big push into transitioning into regenerative style agriculture practices. Those practices include conservation tillage and cover cropping, and we're not spraying chemicals all over our fields. It's going to leach into our water. And there was something else I wanted to say. Well, that's okay. We'll come back to it maybe. Low inputs. That's a huge thing in agriculture and water quality is we are not applying any fertilizer to our fields. We are strictly using cover crops to cycle our nutrients. So all these things are huge factors to water quality. I'm super excited to share those with you. I'm super thankful for the partnership with Mill Creek Alliance so that we can continue to track the data from testing our water. Our water testing site is actually right kind of catty-corner from this building. If you go out in the parking lot, you can see it. It all sort of drains down here and then goes under the parking lot. So very cool. Yes, and out to the Mill Creek. So I'm super thankful to be here, and thank you all for being here. I'm very excited.
All right, everyone, let's get started with the main event. Tonight is largely about the water quality monitoring program and the results from the water quality monitoring program. But I do want to say a few words about some of our other programs. I need my slide control guide. Go to the next one if you would. All right. First, I would like to recognize the grantors and sponsors who make our water quality monitoring program possible. We're very lucky and grateful to have the support of Butler County Stormwater and Butler County Water and Sewer. Butler County is great to us and to our program and allow us to use the water quality lab at the wastewater treatment plant up off Crescentville Road. We literally could not run the program without their support. Also have to recognize tremendous support that we get from the Metropolitan Sewer District of Greater Cincinnati, MSD. Long time sponsors and supporters of the Mill Creek Alliance. We work with them on water quality monitoring, but also on many other projects. Their work and our creek intersect each other in many places. So even if we didn't like each other, we'd still have to work together. But fortunately, we get along pretty well. Also, finally, I would definitely like to recognize some private foundations that support our water quality monitoring program, particularly the L&L Nippert Charitable Foundation and Duke Energy. We could not run the program literally without them. Also, again, thanks to folks who are making the event possible tonight and possible for it to go out over the internet and on cable TV, our friends at ICRC TV who are broadcasting this live as we speak on their website and on, I believe, on Facebook. And again, Gorman for allowing us to have the use of this great facility tonight. Okay, very quickly, just sort of what we're going to go through here tonight. You know, we've already had some remarks from Nicole and Amanda. I'm going to give you a very brief, and I promise it'll be brief, overview of some of our other projects besides water quality monitoring. And then we will get the perspective of some very valuable folks. Some of our water quality monitoring volunteers will come up and give you their thoughts on why they do what they do and the impact that it's making. We'll get some other comments from our good friend Sean, who is an avid fisherman and who fishes many places along the Mill Creek and has, you know, an inspiring story to tell about, you know, how he has personally witnessed the creek changing over the years and the kinds and the types and the size of fish that he is now catching throughout the watershed. And then last, but certainly not least, the main event, we will get into the water quality monitoring results themselves with Audra Roberts and Dr. Mike Miller. So briefly, those of you who are in the water quality monitoring program are probably familiar with this, a very basic map of the Mill Creek watershed. It shows all the locations of our sampling sites. We're now up to 57 sites that were sampled last year. We have 17 teams of citizen scientists who give us so much of their time and go out and sample those spots every month. And there's a whole nother group of amazing volunteers that are working in the lab to analyze those samples along with Audra and our interns. It's really, truly an amazing example of what we can all accomplish together. As I said, a few quick words about some of the other things we do besides water quality monitoring, which is a lot. We do a lot with a small staff. We hit way above our weight, I think. So, you know, our mission is, you know, we have a mission statement, like everybody has a mission statement, but you all know what our mission is. We want to restore and protect the Mill Creek and its watershed, and we want it to be a place where both nature and the residents of our watershed and the communities in our watershed can all thrive. I say this all the time. We can't say it enough. You can't have a healthy environment without a healthy economy. These two things are not mutually exclusive, and they do and can coexist. We can do both. We can have a healthy economy and a vibrant community and protect the environment. You know, these things can all happen together. So let's talk a little bit about our focus areas: restoration, education, recreation. Just a few quick examples of the great restoration projects that Bennett oversees. These pictures are of a Lowhead Dam, a shore crossing site, which the Mill Creek Yacht Club, and we have Commodore Kaler right here in the front row. This is lovingly called Bone Crusher Falls by the Yacht Club. You know, you can see it's a pretty big obstacle. You know, some of the Lowhead Dams, sewer crossings in Mill Creek, are relatively small, might only be a foot tall. Bone Crusher Falls and a couple of the others are quite large, you know, 3 or 4 feet tall. And we don't have salmon around here, you know, so nothing's jumping over that. So what we have done over the years is mitigate them step by step. We're clearing out the path for fish and turtles and other critters to get up into the watershed and repopulate the watershed. So we do this by building riffles, which is basically an underwater ramp made out of native rock. And if you get your elevations right, The top of the ramp is the same elevation as the top of the Lowhead Dam, and it forms a beautiful pool, and fish and other critters can just swim right up and keep going right over the top of the dam. There used to be more than 20 such obstructions in the Mill Creek, just on the main stem. We've now got it whittled down to about 6. By the end of this year, we'll have it down to 4, because Bone Crusher Falls and another one at Clark Street, right on the border of Reading and Arlington Heights, will be mitigated this summer. So we see the light at the end of the tunnel. Pretty soon we're going to have the entire main stem of Mill Creek and the tributaries reopened to fish and turtles and other critters that are trying to repopulate the watershed, and that's just amazing. Another project that we just kicked off, this project is up in Butler County in Westchester Township, actually. The sort of triangular parcel here is owned by a developer, North Point Development, and they're the ones who are building these manufacturing and light industrial buildings over here, but most of this site is in the floodway and in the floodplain. They can't develop it, so they are donating it to us, and we are going to do a wetlands restoration project on that site. Johnny, if you go to the next one. This is a partial concept map of how that's going to look. You know, they're going to be building on this over in here, but then the rest of it is going to get restored into a wetlands connected to the Mill Creek. There's also a small tributary that comes down through here that we're going to restore to its natural path, put some sinuosity, some twists and turns back into it. That project just kicked off last Friday. We got a big grant from the H2 Ohio program from the state of Ohio, and that project is now underway. So that one will also be complete by the end of this year. Johnny. All right, our other program is Johnny's Bailiwick. Right here, he's the man. And I got to give Johnny a lot of credit. You know, the pandemic was tough on a lot of people, a lot of organizations, including ours, but probably the biggest impact to any of our programs from the pandemic was on our education program, because, you know, we take kids out in the creek. We do field trips. You know, we sometimes go and give lectures and classes and stuff like that, but, you know, what we really like and what we do best is we get people outside and we take kids to the creek. And we couldn't do that for the better part of 3 years. And so our education program truly suffered. You know, we were doing our best to provide virtual resources and virtual field trips and things like that, but it's just, you know, it's really not the same. And Johnny came on with us a little over a year ago, and you know, had the mission of rebuilding the education program basically from scratch. And he's done an amazing job with that. We have all kinds of programs going on. You know, we've got sort of what's been a traditional program for us, water quality testing right by the stream on the picture on the right. We have, Johnny's developed relationships even with programs that work with international students. The picture in the middle there is a group of international students that were visiting Cincinnati and that we took out and did some macroinvertebrate and other seining right down the road here in Reading. And then the picture on the left, Johnny with a bunch of kids. Johnny's been great. Going beyond our traditional education program, which is mostly middle school and high school kids, and building up summer programs with community centers and other NGOs like WIN working in neighborhoods. So we now have a full slate of summer programs that include art programs and scavenger hunts with nature, and it's just been amazing. And last but not least, Johnny has kicked off our Makatiwa Anglers program, where we take kids from urban areas and teach them how to fish. You know, we're getting them back out to the creek, because a lot of them don't even know the creek is in their neighborhood. They've been physically cut off from it by fences and high banks and lots of honeysuckle, and often don't even know it's there. And Johnny's getting kids back out to the creek and teaching them to fish. And so last year was the first year. It was amazing success. Everybody loved it. So we're going to continue doing that. We'll be doing it again this year. So that's truly been amazing. And in recreation, we do a whole host of things. I think a lot of you know, a lot of you are members of the Mill Creek Yacht Club that takes so many people out paddling on the stream every year. We do public paddles, which are open to anyone who wants to register, but we also do a bunch of special trips. We try really hard to get elected officials and administrators and other organizations like the Port Authority and the Chamber of Commerce. You know, we want to get those kinds of folks out on the creek too, so that they understand the possibilities and they see the improvements on the creek firsthand, because it really is a different world when you see the creek from stream level. It really is amazing. So we do a lot of that, but we also do a lot of other things. You know, we've mentioned in the past that there's a lot of fishing going on in the creek, and Bruce and others have done some fly fishing trips with Buckeye United Fly Fishing, other fly fishing groups. I dare you, raise your hands if 25 years ago you were around here and you looked at Mill Creek and you thought, oh, in a little while we'll be taking people fly fishing out there. Anybody? No, I didn't figure there'd be any takers on that one. So there's so much great stuff that's going on in recreation. I also want to mention quickly that we're working hard on bike trail development. You know, we want to extend the Mill Creek Greenway Trail from its current southern end in South Cumminsville all the way down to the Ohio River. We're making great progress on that with a whole lot of partners. We're working on the Triangle Trail, which is more up in this neighborhood, where we want to connect some major county parks, Winton Woods and Sharon Woods, as well as the West Fork Mill Creek and the main stem of Mill Creek. And last but not least, again, the Yacht Club does an amazing job with the paddling trips, but they also do a tremendous number of cleanups. The water quality is doing much better, as we'll all hear, but somehow still a lot of trash winds up in the creek, and the Yacht Club and a lot of great volunteers work hard to get that cleaned up over the years. So, skip this one, Johnny. And last but not least, I just want to say, you know, all this stuff, all of your work, all of the staff's work, all of our volunteers' work, it's working. It really is working. You'll hear the water quality results tonight, but the proof is in the pudding. The proof is what we see every day out on the creek. The eagle picture was taken last week, right here in Evendale. We're seeing bald eagles up and down the whole length of the creek now. They wouldn't be hanging out here if there weren't good fish population for them to eat. And I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder, but the picture on the right is a salamander that was found recently in the creek, which is a really, really, really good sign, because they're very sensitive to water quality. And one of our other speakers will be talking more about that. So thank you. All your hard work is working. And let's move on with the program. Thank you very much. Okay. Audra, I'd like to invite Audra to come up. She is going to introduce our next couple of speakers to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Audra Roberts. So nice to see you here this evening. More from me later, but I thought it would be really important to get some other perspectives, some people from outside of the, the regular staff, and even some community members in to share their view of the Mill Creek. So to start, we'll have some perspectives from a couple of our water quality monitoring program volunteers. We're going to start with Bridget Taylor. She spends a lot of time out in the water, both in her personal time and professionally. So, Bridget?
Hello. My name is Bridget Taylor. I'm an environmental scientist at Osenko, where I collect water quality samples, do data management, and make GIS maps. But before Osenko, I started collecting water quality samples for the Mill Creek Alliance back in 2015. I was attending college at the University of Cincinnati, and one of my roommates invited me along to sample. So we rode around on his motorcycle and sampled sites on the west side. I am not really sure where, to be exact, but we always finish sampling at a restaurant called Under the Bridge, which highly recommend. So we were somewhere around there, and the sites were pretty industrial. And I only sampled like 2 seasons on and off during college. And then I started sampling again in 2019 through the present. And my sites now are along the West Fork Mill Creek. So I have 5 sites. Okay, it's better. Sorry. One site is behind an apartment building where I've seen ducks, cardinals, songbirds. There's a good amount of honeysuckle in the area, trees also. Another site is a golf course, which oddly enough, there's never anyone golfing on a Saturday morning. Every Saturday, I don't understand why there's no one there. But along the creek, it's like typically pretty small, sometimes like barely flowing. And there's a lot of like prairie grasses, there's frogs croaking. It's very pretty. Another site is Glenwood Gardens, which is very beautiful. It's really nice we have to like walk along on the paths there, and then under the creek flows underneath a bridge. And there's honeysuckle in the area, which is unfortunate, but that also is pretty tiny of a creek. And then my favorite site is along Mills Road, which is close to Glenwood Gardens. And the water level there changes like very drastically. So like one week, it had rained a lot the week before we sampled, and we could see flood levels that were like above the road. So if we had sampled it like the week before, it would have been all flooded. But then when we were sampling there, it was like a small creek, like a normal creek that we usually see. So it was, the water level change is pretty crazy. I've also seen turkeys there, deer, so that's really exciting. My least favorite site is on Hanover Road. It's in the like suburban neighborhood, and that's a sewer overflow site, and it usually smells pretty bad. But one time there was a couch along the riverbank, and then a few months later it was gone. So that was weird. There's a lot of honeysuckle there also. I've also had the pleasure of kayaking a large portion of the Mill Creek with Johnny Dwyer. And yeah, we did the Bone Falls or whatever, Bone Crusher Falls. That was very hard and challenging. But yeah, it's interesting how much the Mill Creek changes. So like one area was like next to a nature preserve, and then the other area, it's like all cement, and you're like kayaking through literally cement. But back to sampling, I've enjoyed sampling because it's nice to see the change in seasons at like these sites, like specifically month to month. Like last year, it was when we sampled in March, there was snow on the ground, and then by July, we're like sweating at 8 a.m. So it's nice to see like the changes and like the leaves change. Volunteering has been a nice excuse to get outside, and I've enjoyed sampling with my friends, but then also meeting and getting to know other like-minded people. I think that's it. Thank you. Yeah, feel free to ask me other questions later if you want.
Our next speaker is Tim Wells. He has a very impassioned view of the Mill Creek and is quite the activist. I'll let him share his experience.
Thanks, Audra. And so I'm Tim Wells. I have 1 year of sampling at the Mill Creek, and it's been very good. My background is in geology and earth sciences. So I got interested in the Mill Creek when we moved back to Cincinnati 2 years ago, and I live on an area where there's a tributary out by Smith Road and 747. I don't know if you're familiar with that area. It's what we're going to talk about. These are my pictures up here. North Point is putting in some warehouses, as you can see in this photo right there. And in driving by, I noticed that there was an area where they had cleared some spot through the trees and the brush right down to the creek. And I brought that to Audra's attention, and Dave and others helped out. And the engineering department, I think, contacted the North Point people, and they came in and they put the riprap or the rocks here. And then they proceeded, and that's a point of contention for me. So they came in, and they cleared all the way from Union Center down to the railroad tracks. It's about 0.4 or 0.5 miles. And as you can see in this picture to the right, they left not a blade of grass, not a tree. And so it's been that way. And this picture is from the mid of January. So it's been like that. And I tried to get an update because I'm sure that there's a plan to address that. But in the meantime, there'll be many months go by where there won't be any ability to hold the sediment back. And we know that sedimentation is a big issue, the number one issue in waterways in Ohio. And about 30% of sedimentation comes naturally. 70% comes from human interaction. And as we can see here, that's for sure. And then the EPA tells us that there's lots of issues come up. We know that, it's very costly. I think it's about $17 billion a year in costs, according to the EPA, from sedimentation alone, and the degradation of the waterways. The vegetation doesn't grow, the wildlife doesn't thrive, can plug up the gills of the fish. I mean, there's a lot of issues with, and just the actual water treatment facilities have to deal with that sedimentation that increase all of us, our costs for water. So I'm hoping to get some responses soon from engineering about what they're going to do with that. And based on what Dave said, there's a real nice plan to address wetlands, and that's encouraging. I wasn't familiar with that, and I was hoping to get that information before I got up here because I don't want to speak out of turn. So that's my story. And the Mill Creek, up north from there, flows behind a little strip mall area as it goes under 747 and north and east. From that point back to the east and north, it is a really nice area. I walked that area. It's about a mile from it's Tri-County Baptist Church, has a big ground, and it comes around there and behind some buildings, but it's covered in trees. The vegetation is thick, and the banks are nice, and I walk that with my boots routinely to pick up the rubbish that seems to be never ending. But that's one of my many retirement opportunities to get out and enjoy nature and to do something good to keep our waterways clean. So that's my talk.
Good evening, everyone. Dave already introduced me, but my name is Johnny Dwyer. It is my honor tonight to be here to share some testimonies. But I wanted to introduce someone. It was a warm autumnal day, and I was out there with one of our newest champions of the resurgence of the Mill Creek, Eric Woodall. He was meeting me out north side near Camp Washington because General Electric's Green Team Network, the Ohio Valley Forestry Foundation, and Peter's Nursery and Garden Store had all came together to put in 40 plus native trees, sycamores, red oak, silver, maples, some pawpaws, locusts of different varieties too. But me and Eric were out there at the setting sun along the Mill Creek, a beautiful day, and we're watering all these buckets of all these trees with buckets of the Mill Creek water. We're carrying them up from the riverbanks, dumping them onto the sycamores that we just planted, walking it back down. And lo and behold, out of these bushes pops up this smiling, jubilant face like, "Hey, what you guys doing?" And I was like, "What are you doing?" And we're out in the middle of nowhere. It's getting dark, and I'm just like, okay, there's this stranger out here with us now. Okay, let's say hi. He's fishing. He is fishing. I haven't seen anyone fish Mill Creek except my own reflection as I'm taking teenagers going fishing over the summer and throughout the school year. So I dropped my buckets and I ran over to this gentleman and I said, "My name is Johnny. I love fishing here. Why are you here?" And he too loves fishing. This gentleman said this is his sanctuary. This is his happy place. He couldn't believe the transformation that has occurred since being a wee little lad growing up in Cincinnati's Elmwood Place to being an adult man here in Cincinnati and reclaiming his home and seeing it just restored. I've been talking with people all over the watershed. I see so much passion just radiating from this man. I wake up in the morning and my inbox is busting with photos of these fish that he's caught, and it's 6:30 in the morning, he's already caught like 4 different species of fish, and he's a smiling face. It's snowing outside, and he's still catching these hybrid white striped bass, this rare, what's it called, albino carp. He's caught a catfish that was also 2 different, I'm not familiar right now. I'm a little nervous, Sean. So Sean has the details on like what kind of catfish it was in particular, but it was rare. And I just love seeing Sean's like text messages go on and on and on, how grateful he is. How grateful he is of each and every one of you all, your champions of the Mill Creek's resurgence. Because of everyone in the Alliance, all our volunteers, our staff, from the last 26 years, we've transformed his home, and he continuously is grateful for all of the hard work that you all do. This gentleman is super humble, he's super joyous, and he's very passionate. He's seen small fish, big fish, beavers, big bucks that he describes being the size of a car. And then just the other day when he caught just these rare species, the videos of him measuring the size of the salamander to his arm, unbelievable. He's humble, he's generous, he's kind, he's passionate. He's a man who loves to fish, and we're going to keep making sure that Sean continues to fish on the Mill Creek. It's my honor to introduce Sean T. of Elmwood Place.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? I'm not going to lie, this is the first time I've ever spoken in front of everybody, so if I look nervous, I absolutely am crazy nervous. Okay, here we go. Back when I was a kid, I wanted to go fishing one time. It was like 1984. I asked my uncle. I was like 10 years old. I asked him to take me fishing. We ended up down off Evans Field, and we walked across, and I looked over the wall. And I mean, I knew what littering was, but that was the first day I seen pollution. I mean, when the water was green and blue and like, it was disgusting. I wasn't fishing that day, and I didn't think I'd ever fish the Mill Creek again, ever. I can't even hardly see this, I'm so nervous. All right, let's just fast forward to 2004. I was in Kent, Washington. I was upset about a few things, and I decided just to walk down the creek for some time to get away. And I noticed a heck of a different waterway than I had the last time I'd seen it. But it was still pretty rank back then in 2004. It was still pretty rank back then. But I still got a carp that day. I promise you I did. So in 2018, I entered rehab. I was fighting mega demons in my life, and I still do. I still do every day. I struggle, but that's where the Mill Creek comes in. It's my sanctuary. I entered rehab in 2018 on a whim one day. I walked down to the bottom of 69th Street in Elmwood Place. I was there just to look around the creek and, reflect on my life as I was pulling it back together. And there was this really cool waterfall area. And I could tell it was deep. I could tell it was, I could just look down and tell that the way they had set it up, it was deep, and I couldn't imagine how it was formed. This ain't natural. I said, somebody did this. And then when I looked down in the water, it was crazy how pretty the water was, how clear, how far down I could see. And my first thing, I know there's fish in there. There's got to be fish in there. And I went home and I told Sabrina, I said, it's got to. Anyway, I'll get into all that. Then I thought to myself, oh, yeah, okay. And then I found out I never would have guessed how much the Mill Creek would become a part of my treatment, becoming sober and staying together. It's a part of my recovery, and it's a part of my life. It really is. I go there, By the time I'm done talking with y'all, you'll see what I mean. I'm just a fisherman. That's all I do. I have been my whole life, and I know a lot about what it takes to sustain a healthy population of fish species. And it's all there, man. It's in the Mill Creek. I'm catching fish species that need certain levels of nutrients to be met to live and to reproduce. And these fish aren't just living, man, or surviving. They're thriving. I've caught some fish that are amazingly thick and just, I have a ton of pictures with background to easily show where I'm fishing so people don't think, well, he caught that somewhere else. But I make sure I set it up like that. So if people question me, you can see the truckway leasing sign in back. You know where that's at. That's on the Mill Creek. Sorry. The major turnaround that has come about on the Mill Creek, it's so incredible. It's not just the fishing that's back though, and that's another thing that I'm passionate about is wildlife, animals. I'm a feeder of wildlife. I know it's wrong in areas, but I feed stray cats. That's just what I do. I've had so many wildlife encounters with a multitude of different mammals, reptiles, birds, coyotes, beavers, eagles, insects of different species. I'd never seen a gray snet in my life. Until one day it swam across the creek, literally right in front of me. Oh, I lost my spot again. Sorry. It swam across where I was fishing. It slithered up to where my fishing poles were, and it just hung out for a minute because it was a cold morning. So it hung out sunning. And I'm sorry, I keep getting lost. It carried on for a minute. It sat there for a minute, then it carried on its way. Okay. I'll keep my finger here so I don't keep. I told you I'm a nervous wreck. I just want to go fishing like this. All right, here it is. I can go on for hours, literally. I can go on for hours about watching beaver at 9 a.m. in Northside. Beaver, Northside. Did you see beaver in a Northside? But at the same time, I'm catching a 6-pound hybrid striper, or I'm sitting there trying to catch a carp and a beautiful eagle flies over. When I started seeing so many mammals, I got 3 mineral blocks. They're for wildlife in the wild. You set them out like salt blocks, basically. And when I realized there were so many wildlife along there, things in me changed, and that's what everybody needs. Everybody needs to get that passion. And like I said, it's because of the passion of these guys at the Mill Creek Alliance that my passion, I can even chase it. I'd have never thought I'd have been catching 7. Look at this. Look at that. The Mill Creek. That's a sauger. Their average size in the Ohio River is 15 inches. That's a 15-and-a-half-inch sauger. Now it's eating good, and it just didn't get dropped there. And that's a walleye. Smallmouth bass, stripers, white bass, carp, cat. I mean, they're all there. Every week it seems like I find something new, and I'm getting there. All right. One day I was on the creek. I was trying to reflect and ponder life when I ran into somebody here at the Mill Creek Alliance. It was Johnny, and he provided me the opportunity to thank someone for all this transformation that I've seen. Here he was in the middle of the forest planting trees. Funny how we both talked about this, ain't this? Without no coordination. Here he was in the forest planting trees with another gentleman towards sunset, and I was there trying to sort out things in my life. And I told him I want to help. I want to somehow do my part. And I've begun doing small cleanups by myself along the waterways. I pick up litters in areas that I'm familiar with, and I pick up 2-3 garbage bags worth, and I put them in a local dumpster with permission. I've made signs spoken with Metro bus drivers because the Metro bus drivers, I don't understand this. They get done with their routes, and they walk down on our walkway, and they chuck their garbage back in there. And I've repeatedly, made calls to Metro about that, and that's on SD and Paddock, SD and Paddock. But I've cleaned up their garbage so much, it's just that becomes like a natural thing, it seems like. I'm not part of the Mill Creek Alliance. I'm not part of the Mill Creek Yacht Club. But I am an advocate for the Mill Creek and its resurgence and its comeback. It's only I know it's only a little bit of time, and I know my impact is small of what I do, but over the length of a summer, I've taken out quite a bit of trash. I fish in an area where some Metro drivers, I just spoke on that, and I just wanted someone to know that when they hear Mill Creek, it isn't like it used to be. I mean, we call it, I can't say it, and I won't say it what we used to call it, but everybody, I think, can guarantee what I used to call it. And I'm just thankful that there's people like this Mill Creek Alliance, and when I found out about it, it blew me away. I mean, I've caught fish as a fisherman my whole life that I've never caught before. Like, I've never caught a sawguy, I've never caught a sauger, never caught a walleye, never seen a gray rat snake, I've never seen a coyote, never seen wild beaver. And this is all just in my area. This is a stretch. I fished the lower section. This salamander, he was this long. And I was actually fishing, and it's kind of a funny story. I know probably just about everything I say. But when I pulled it up out of the water, it scared the crap out of me. I thought it was a Mill Creek monster. I didn't know what the heck it was. I didn't know what it was. So I was trying to shake it off the hook, and then I thought, oh, no, Johnny would love to see this. So I put it over here, and then I looked at it, and I seen how beautiful, and then I figured out what it was. And it was amazing. It was amazing to see something that, I mean, I didn't even know they existed in Ohio. I knew we had like the Eastern Hellbenders. That's at first what I thought it was. I was like, I'm about to be famous. I'm getting a paycheck. I thought for real, I did. And then until reality set in and I got what I normally get in life, the second half. But anyway, I mean, I could stand up here all day, and I've actually hand-fed snapping turtles down there. I was down here fishing, and he kept eating the bait on my hook. So when he came up for air, I threw a piece out there, and I started luring him in. So I figured if I got him here, he's eating, I can fish. And it worked. It worked out. It was simple. It worked out. But that's another thing I want to tell you about. I heard you guys mention turtles and about more. I've caught so many turtles. I mean, I've caught, Sabrina will tell you, 100 turtles in one summer down there fishing. Snapping turtles, red-eared sliders, them big soft-shell turtles. She'll tell you, I've probably caught, guys, and I'll quit boring you, but I've probably caught over 1,000 fish out of that creek in the last 3.5 years. I don't make up stories. That's why I take my camera with me. So, because if I told people half the things that I tell them, if I tell them I caught a 15.5-inch sauger out of the Mill Creek, they're going to take me to Romans. They're going to they're not going to believe that. But there are a couple issues that I do have, and I'm glad I thought about it. I don't understand the channel cats, the channel cat's the only one that's really not thriving. And usually channel catfish, they're like carp. They thrive in any environment. They're really long, and they're really skinny. And I thought I'd bring that up. And outside of that, I think I just want to thank Johnny for the opportunity to give my side and to thank Heritage Gorman Farms for hosting this, because it's like you said, it's an effort, and because of everybody's passion, I get to chase mine at the end of the day. I get to go down there when I'm struggling with my addiction. I get to go down there and think about my brother who lost his life to addiction. I don't go there just to fish, man. It's more than that. Them walking trails, they mean a lot, man. And then when I see people throwing garbage down, I get so mad, and I've got so many other issues in my life that I need to be working on. But I also want to make this a part of my life because I got that passion for it. I love it, man. Thanks, man. Thanks, brother. Johnny, thanks, man.
Hello again. So I'm pleased to be here completing my first full year as program coordinator for the Water Quality Monitoring Program. Having come from an Atlantic Coast marine science background and 14 years in the public aquarium industry, switching back to a freshwater creek environment was quite the learning curve, still is. I haven't really spent any time in freshwater creeks since I was a kid. And I think now is probably an appropriate time to have a moment of silence for all of the salamanders that my little brother and I once caught and smuggled back home. You didn't die in vain. So water quality really is the heart of what we do at the Mill Creek Alliance. It is directly linked to every restoration, every education, and every recreation initiative that we pursue. The level 2 credible data that we generate supplements the data used by other local organizations such as Ohio EPA, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, MSD, and others. The truths we reveal in this data help us to determine how to manage our water and surrounding lands in hopes that the Clean Water Act standards will be met. There's also a huge opportunity to provide educational engagement in the local community through hands-on learning in the field. 2023 actually marks the 10-year anniversary of the Water Quality Monitoring Program. We have grown, not just in the number of sites that we sample, but also in the number of volunteers that we have participating and the variety of tests that we perform. In 2022, we had 78 samplers working in the field, 23 analysts working in the lab, and 12 of those people performed both tasks. Our activities occur on the second Saturday of every month from March through November. Samplers collect water samples at each of our 57 sampling sites, and they take field observations. Between the team in the field and the team in the lab, we analyze the samples for 10 different water quality parameters. The data we generate is available on our website and is formally presented annually at this very event. This robust body of information we get to share tonight truly would not exist without the efforts of our volunteers. If the samplers and the lab analysts in the room could please stand and be recognized for what you do. Thank you so much. And I would be remiss to miss recognizing the 2022 Blue Team Lab Leader, Grace Berman, who is joining us via Zoom this evening. She was actually hired and onboarded prior to me, so she taught me how to do my job, and this year would have not gone nearly as well without her help, so thank you, Grace. If we were to try and put a dollar value on the we're trying to put a dollar amount on the value of your work, it would come to about just shy of $60,000, which I think is really impressive, $60,000 worth of skilled labor. So thanks again to all of the volunteers. So what do we test for and why? Everything you see here plays a critical role in the health of our water. Phosphate and nitrate are naturally occurring nutrients in our environmental waters, and they are essential to aquatic life. However, when their levels increase due to human activities, the results are detrimental. Conductivity is an indirect measure of total dissolved salts in our water. Obviously, this is supposed to be a freshwater environment, right? So the salt content should be low. Human activities, however, contribute to a steady increase in conductivity over time, not just here, but in a lot of areas around the country, and this is of great concern. Turbidity is an indicator of the clarity of our water, which has a huge impact on plant growth, for better or for worse. pH is a measure of how acidic or basic the water is. Our local creek area tends to be on the basic side, usually between 7 and 8 on the pH scale. Now, the natural trend for pH is to drop over time, but thanks to the large amount of photosynthesizing algae and concrete embankments that we have here in the Mill Creek area, our pH tends to be a little abnormally high. Coliform bacteria, and especially E. coli, are normally found in the digestive tracts of warm-blooded animals, including ourselves, and can be released into the environment through fecal waste. When coliforms contaminate the environment in large enough numbers, they are a human health hazard. Optical brighteners are the chemicals used in your laundry detergent that make your brights brighter and your whites whiter. They are not harmful in and of themselves, and they are effectively removed through water treatment, but the fact that we can find them in our water samples would indicate that raw sewage is somehow getting into the waterway. Chlorophyll is directly, the amount of chlorophyll directly relates to the amount of plant life and algae we have in our water. You do want the right amount of the right kinds of plants in your ecosystem. And more of a focus, and starting this year, on temperature. Temperature is a critical parameter for aquatic life, and a recent report released by the Midwest Biodiversity Institute revealed a steady increase in the temperature of the Mill Creek over the past several years. This could have some serious implications for our ecosystems. The big takeaway that I want you to get from all of these is that each of these parameters does not stand alone. They are all interconnected. One affects the others. And so our goal is to have all of them be at healthy levels at the same time. It is at this point that I will turn the presentation over to the real professional, Dr. Michael Miller. Dr. Mike Miller is the Professor Emeritus of Biology at the University of Cincinnati. He has over 40 years experience teaching water chemistry to his senior and graduate limnology course and laboratories. He's done water chemistry all over the world in field and laboratory conditions on research projects. And he has over 10 years experience directing the Citizens Volunteer Water Quality Monitoring Program for Rivers Unlimited, which is our sister organization that does a very similar type of work, only on the lower Great Miami River. So without further ado, Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Audra. I appreciate that. I want to welcome you to the annual event. And let me just confirm for Sherman that the MBI study found 63 species of fish in the Mill Creek, and which is an unparalleled number. They're not all common, and that Necturus is a very rare salamander because it is one of the only ones that keeps its gills as an adult, so it needs high oxygen during the year to breathe. And our herpetologist at the University of Cincinnati said that was a big find and said thank you. So that's amazing. It's a first for the Mill Creek. It's rare in the region as well. Next slide. What we're going to do here is I'm going to talk about how we monitor, we try to evaluate. The EPA in Ohio uses numeric scores for fish and macroinvertebrates. They're scores that go up to 60. They use the sum of a variety of metrics, and those metrics are generated from the fish species and their numbers and from the macroinvertebrate species and their numbers. So what we've tried to do is do the same sort of thing, but in a simpler fashion for water chemistry to explain its variation or deviation from what would be normal for the Clean Water Act. And this thing isn't working, right? This line right here at 3.5, what we've done is we've scored the parameters 1 to 5, 5 being excellent, would be equivalent to exceptional warm water habitat in the state of Ohio, and green is good, would be acceptable in the warm water habitat. Both the warm water habitat and the exceptional warm water habitat meet the Clean Water Act standards for fishable, swimmable. And then we get enriched or slightly impaired waters that we put in yellow that are going from 3 to 3.5 on our scale, and below 3 is red. And we get values through this entire range for each parameter. So what we do is score each parameter on each date in one of these categories, average them across the stream, and can characterize the water quality of the site. Now, nobody else uses this tool. It's one that we just genned up, but we've been using it for a number of years, and it's working for us. But Some things, nitrates 1 milligram per liter, phosphates 0.1 milligram per liter, sometimes goes up a little higher. pH, nothing over 8.3. Over 8.3, it's being driven by extreme photosynthesis. If we go down to turbidity, which is the muddiness of the river, NTUs, nephelometer turbidity units, up to 20 is good. Anything over 20 is bad. Conductivity, 700. Above 700, we start to eliminate fish species, particularly darters. It takes 5 or 6 species of darters to get a high quality water. They're a very sensitive subgroup of small fishes that live on the bottom because they don't have a swim bladder and feed on macroinvertebrates. But this 700, our normal waters in our area are hard water, and they have a conductivity of about 500. That's the most that they can dissolve from the limestone that we live on. And anything over 500 is usually contributed by sodium or potassium chloride, but usually a chloride. And so this area is polluted by chlorides. E. coli, I'm using single, we evaluate each sample, so I'm using the old EPA single sample standard. The standard for a geometric mean for excellent is 106 colonies of E. coli per 100 mLs. I'm using a single standards of Poisson distribution, and you can have a high reading. But in any case, you'll see that it works fairly well. Optical brighteners we're using, when they come out of the sewage plant, the limit is about 14 or 15. So they're reduced, they come in at about 120, and they're reduced quickly as they go through the sewage plant. We say under 20 is not polluted, but over 20 is getting optical brighteners from straight through pipes or failing septic systems. And the chlorophyll is the thing the EPA is going after. They do not want chlorophylls over, this may be wrong, over 30. 30 micrograms per liter is the level at which the state says we can begin to get oxygen variations that go up in the daytime and come down at night more than 7 milligrams per liter. In the summertime, the water holds about 10 milligrams of oxygen. And if it goes below 5, the fish get threatened. Well, you can photosynthesize from 10 to 13 and go down 7 and be down at 5. So, you know, this variation is what they're trying to control. They do not want algal biomasses that will generate stress for fish and macroinvertebrates. And that's usually generated through oxygen. So we try and control nutrients up here, not to grow algae above 30 on the scale. Next slide. Here's our parameters. Phosphorus and nitrogen go into algal cells. We measure it as chlorophyll A. And it also, at low levels, it's turbidity. In the summertime, the turbidity in the water isn't from silt and clays, it's from algae. It's green, and it scatters the light, and so it can't get to the bottom. And what these do when they photosynthesize, since we don't measure oxygen, it's a transient, and we can't take it back to the lab, we measure the pH, which stays elevated for longer periods. And we say that when it's growing strongly, the pH over 8.3 has got to be generated by the algae capturing CO2 from bicarbonate and getting a CO2 molecule and producing an OH. An OH makes the water basic. And so anything over 8.3 is a pH elevation we don't want to see. Conductivity of the salts, I'm going to say more about that later, made of calcium bicarbonate mostly, and the human component is almost always chlorides, sodium, potassium. E. coli, of course, are human fecal materials, and they have limits I'll talk about. High phosphate is the one that the EPA is going after very strongly. They're trying to generate a water quality standard for phosphorus in the state of Ohio of 0.1 milligrams per liter of total phosphate and 1 milligram for nitrate, and then optical brighteners. So we get sewage effects and eutrophication effects and what our data are going after. Go ahead and hit it again. Keep going. What we're going to do is we take nitrogen and phosphorus, one little P will combine with 15 or 12 nitrogens and 106 CO2s, hit it again, to make an alga and produce ATP and DNA, and hit it again, and then it grows and divides probably after 24 hours. While it's growing, it's producing oxygen and OH radicals, and this is what we're seeing as elevated pH and oxygen variation going up in the day and coming down because of respiration at night. Next slide. Next. So 1 unit of phosphorus makes about 2,500 times that much algae in wet weight. So it's a huge blow up. Phosphorus has low solubility, and it's the key to controlling algae. So that's all the attention is being put on phosphorus. Next slide is E. coli down here. They're coupled with Cryptosporidium, Giardia, and a whole bunch of other diseases, and we try and keep it at below 106 per 100 mLs for swimming, and less than 1030 for canoeing or non-contact recreation. Next slide. Here's the start of it. We look at rainfall over the year. 2-inch rainfall. We had 2-inch rainfalls in 2022, and 1-inch rainfalls, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1-inch rainfalls, and they're spring biased. You'll notice these are our sampling dates. We only were out there with 3 dates when we had rainfall increases. Most of the dates it wasn't raining. We sample monthly 9 times a year. Next slide. We had 47 inches this year. Last year we had 57 inches. When I first started working on the Mill Creek in 1976, we had 39 inches of rain as our average. Climate change is pushing that number up. Here's the discharge in the Mill Creek. And you can see the average of the year was 166. The average on our sample dates was 99 cubic feet per second. But you'll notice that this is a log scale. There's a downward trend over the year, spring biased highs. It's when the big peaks are going to occur. And next slide. What I've done is take our rivers. The Ohio River down here is stage, not cubic feet per second. But the Great Miami River is the largest river. The Little Miami and the Whitewater River in green are intermediate sized, and the Mill Creek is the smallest. And so what I've done is I've put the discharge of these four river systems on our sample dates across the year, so you can kind of see how they go. The Mill Creek is down here in the blue stripes, and its discharge is orders of magnitude smaller than the bigger rivers. And I'm going to show that in a second with the next slide. Oh, no, I'm not. We're going to talk about conductivity. The conductivity is our total salts, and I've got a lot to say about conductivity tonight. This is the Butler County Upper Mill Creek Water Reclamation Facility, puts its effluent in right here. And so above this is Union Center Boulevard in Mason and Montgomery, and below it is the Mill Creek. And you can see it's elevated up here almost at 1,500 microsiemens. Remember, 500 is natural. 700, this red line, is our supposed limit we don't want to go over. And you'll notice that we're over it at most of the time, an average of 847 last year for the river. It gets diluted and it drops as you go down river. Next slide. What happens when we get the conductivity going up? As I said, we eliminate darters, but here's the number of conductivity sensitive fish species over here. There are 8 of them in this list. Here's conductivity of 1,000, this dotted line. Here's our 700. But you'll notice that in order to include all of these species, if we get over 700 or 1,000, the number of species that we find goes down dramatically. So this recovery that Sherman found is in part due to the fact that we must control conductivity in future, and it's going up. It's our one parameter we're not controlling. Over here, you can see the number of conductivity sensitive species as well, and as a function of an IBI score. An IBI score of 40 to 45 is acceptable warm water habitat, this side, for the state of Ohio. This side is deficient. And you know what we're seeing is that if we lose these big fish species, we're losing our IBI score. And that IBI score is the way Ohio regulates water and declares it to be good or not good. It's on fish and macroinvertebrates. Next slide. Here's we are back to the conductivity again. And here's the Ohio River, going upriver to mile 27 and a half up above Tylersville Road. And what I've done is I've taken the average cubic feet per second. And the question is, you know, we have a station right here, mile 13, that we measure flow from. And everything is computed based on one discharge. But the river gets bigger. Up here at this top, it's very, very small. And when we get down to the bottom, it's quite large. What I want to do is calculate the load. How much salt is going down the river? It's a function of the concentration and the amount of water. So what makes the flow go from a point to something quite large at the base? It's accumulation of water along its length in proportion to area. Well, we don't have any way of doing this, so I just use area. And I prorated the water discharge with the area. So at 100% here at 13, it drops in percentages as you go upriver and goes up in percentages as you go downriver. And what I've computed here is the milligram chloride per meter square day in the water column as a result. And here's the chloride up here at 200. And we can compute it in metric tons. This is the average discharge and also the metric tons of chloride per river per day. So we're putting out 50 metric tons. This is one right here. We're putting out, you know, anywhere around 50 metric tons a day of salt at the mouth of the river. You know, we're measuring it up here, mile 13. And here's the sewer plant. That huge peak that we saw at the sewer plant is not most of the salt. Where's that salt coming from? Well, the city, bless its heart, salts our streets. They put on 24,000 tons of NaCl. They put on 29,000 gallons of calcium chloride. They put on 58,000 gallons of brine, which is sodium chloride, and they use 6,500 gallons of beet juice to hold it on the streets. The point is, we're loading our streets with salt with our 20 inches of snow per year, and that goes into the water. And it's not going in as a big component. Salt is infinitely soluble, essentially, in water. So when water moves, salts move. And it's coming in every stream, and it's coming in by infiltration from the banks of the river as you go downriver. And this concept of the load going up to humongous totals, the chloride levels at this is the metric tons per river this is milligrams per meter square day, which is about 20 grams coming off of each meter square of land in greater Cincinnati as it gets down to the base of the river. Well, these are estimates, but I'm just warning you that salt is our big new parameter that we've got to fight, and it's got to be related to source reduction because we can't treat it. It goes right through a sewage plant, absolutely undisturbed, and this is a big problem. Next slide. Well, pH, this is the photosynthesis response, 8.3, which is up here, is the danger level. Our average was 7.87, and 2022 pH was not a problem. One of the reasons that's becoming less of a problem maybe is because the MBI said the QHEI is getting better in the river. And the QHEI, a lot of it is made up of riparian zone trees getting bigger. So despite what the trucking company did down at the Yellow Bridge, you know, we're getting better tree cover. It shades the river. When the river doesn't get sunshine, even if there's phosphorus in it, it doesn't produce chlorophyll and doesn't raise the pH. So maybe this is our habitat improvement. Next slide. The turbidity in NTUs, this could be a lot of it, could be algal turbidity, and probably is during our period. Here's the Ohio River down here, and this is the upstream section. Now this upstream section, is this chloride or is this Sherman's bank restoration? Something for the last couple years has been loading this upstream site with high turbidity. So here's the sewage plant. And this is upstream. This is Union Center Boulevard area. Something is happening up there, and we're seeing it. It's probably not all algal, even though it's completely open up there. It's one of the impacts. Next slide is total phosphorus. This is the key that the Ohio EPA is going after big time. The idea is to keep it at 0.1 milligram per liter. Every site was above 0.1. We were at an average of 0.52. You know, we're not making on that account. There's a big peak here, but as I just did with chloride, I will do this with phosphorus again. This peak just disappears as you go down the river. It's inconsequential compared to what comes out as you move downriver. The equilibrium, this constant concentration, is an equilibrium. There's sources and sinks that are occurring along the way that keeps the concentration fairly constant, but the amount that's coming out at the mouth is very much larger than this amount. This is almost inconsequential in the totals that's coming out of the river mouth, at the river mouth. Next slide, I think, shows that. Yeah, here's what we do for load. Here's the total phosphorus concentration at all the sites in the main stem of the Mill Creek with its discharge over the year on our sample dates. And these are our data on here. And there doesn't appear to be a relationship, you know, in a global sense. Normally at low flow, we see very high concentrations of total phosphorus from point sources. As the flow goes up, it drops, and then it starts up again. When you get into high flow, as we resuspend phosphorus attached to clays in the bottom of the river. But this is fairly constant. And if I multiply that concentration times the discharge, I get a load in kilograms phosphorus per day for the river at Carthage. This isn't at the mouth of the river, this is at Carthage. So this is a single point. But you can see we're getting 200 kilograms of phosphorus per day coming downriver at Carthage. At the mouth of the river, the flow is 2.7 times that flow. So, you know, we're getting almost 500 kilograms, a half a metric ton per day at the mouth of the river at lowish flows. We were out there when the flow was 99 cubic feet per second, and most of this comes out during high flows. Next slide. Here's nitrogen. Nitrate is the other one. You need 10 times as much nitrogen by weight, or maybe 12 or 13 times that for phosphorus. And our concentrated level for clean water is 1. All those sites are under 1. You know, they're doing something right. Here's the sewer plant. The Butler County water treatment facility does a great job at denitrification. It denitrifies its nitrogen. It comes off as harmless gas into the atmosphere as N2. And they've somehow been able to keep that concentration very low. And the river looks incredible. The upstream, it's a little lower. This is Union Center. This is above Union Center Boulevard. Next slide. Here's the same data I showed you for phosphorus with nitrogen. Here's the concentration with discharge. Even at high discharge, the concentrations are constant at Carthage. And here's if I multiply this times the flow, concentration times flow, I get this curve. It obviously shows a positive change with the flow because it's a multiple in there. But it goes up to 600 kilograms, not 100 or 200 kilograms. And at the mouth of the river, it'd be 2.6 times that, or almost 1,500 kilograms of nitrate going into the river. This, of course, goes into the Ohio and into Mississippi, and is part of the oxygen problem in the Gulf of Mexico. Next slide. Now I've done it with area. So this is doing nitrogen and phosphorus with area. Here's the water estimated from the average flow at Carthage right here at 99 cubic feet per second. And if I take the area and blow it up proportionally, because the amount of runoff is area dependent, and it gets up to 200 and some cubic feet per second. And if I multiply that, let me look at it. It says kilograms of nitrogen and phosphorus loss, and we're talking about 200 kilograms of phosphorus and 350 kilograms of nitrogen at the surface. Here's the sewage plant. So that big spike at the sewage plant, if we look at it on the scale of the whole river, is inconsequential. The concentration of nutrients in our river are dependent on these processes of uptake and transformation in the watershed, in the groundwater. And it's a process I don't think we understand at all. And of course, for sewage treatment folks, this is a real conundrum, because everybody is going in at these high points and saying they're the devils, but they're just a small part of the contribution of the whole watershed to it. And we've generated this elemental background for urban streams, as you can see here. Next slide. Here's E. coli. E. coli, we're trying to keep them under 1,030 for canoeing and kayaking, and over 100, which isn't even on this scale, log scale. But you'll notice that we're very close. Well, the average is 2120, the median 400, the geometric mean 585. Now, these don't agree, I guess, with the MBI numbers, but 585 is well under 1030. So for the most part, over the year, the stream in our interpretation of these numbers is canoeable and kayakable as long as you don't put your head underwater. That means non-contact, don't put your head underwater, eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. Keep it out, and open cuts, and immune compromised people. But other than that, it's better than it ever has been in the past. Next slide. There are some gyrations. Here's the total coliforms. These aren't regulated, and they're order of magnitude higher, almost 6x higher. And this is the variation over the year. So we get a lot of variation in coliforms, more so than E. coli. They don't mean anything, but we measure them as part of our measurement. Next slide. Is the suspended chlorophyll. This is the guy we're trying to control with phosphorus in particular. And we're trying to keep it under 30. 30 is well off scale. The Great Miami and the Little Miami and the Great Miami and the Mill Creek this year, it did not have a chlorophyll problem at all. It was all quite low. Now, this is an in vivo chlorophyll. It's not accepted by the Ohio EPA. It's a kind of a professional guesstimate. We calibrate this by extracting chlorophyll from river samples, the Little Miami, the Mill Creek, the Great Miami, the Ohio River, and making a regression of the in vivo fluorescence versus extracted chlorophyll to calibrate our machine several times a year. Next slide. Optical whiteners, here's our goal is to keep it under 20. Here's the effluent. Something is getting through the sewer plant. It's odd. We've never seen this until the last 2 years, but something's getting through the Butler County facility. The average is 21. and the upper river is much lower than the lower river, but this is all sewered up here, and is an acceptable level around 14. Next slide. Now we're going to go to our water quality score. So we got all those data, and I run them through this program to give them a ranking of 1 to 5. I sum them and then average them. And here's our average. 3.5 and above is what I call accepted to the Clean Water Act standard. Below is not. And here's the Mill Creek main stem stations. And you can see that here's the effluent from the sewage plant. And there's a fair period to recover. It does recover. And the upper section up here is the real success story. This has been here for the past 4 years. This is the Mason Butler County and the Union Center Boulevard area. This area was developed in the 1980s, 90s, using what was then the current standards for construction that's enforced by Laura's organization, the Mill Creek Conservation District. And the rules were more relaxed back then than they are now. You had to build detention ponds. They were smaller. They didn't have to have the removal of sediment that they require today. They didn't have to hold back as much water as they require today. But 40 years have gone by. Those trees that were planted as little twigs are now big. They did put a golf course right down the middle of the town that's in the low-lying area where water runs, and it gets treated. They did put in curbless gutters, curbless streets, so that the water can run into the yards and infiltrate, so it doesn't run off. And what it's done is worked. So the old technology that was in force back when that was developed in 40 years is producing what we would call very good water for an urban industrial area, except for turbidity, that one that showed up, that's the negative. Next slide. Here are my water quality ranks for the Mill Creek, and conductivity is too high. It's under 3. Here's that 3.5, our magic number, and you'll notice that conductivity is poor. Total phosphorus is very poor. Nitrate, however, because of that denitrification upstream, is incredibly good. So these are the parameters that make it. Here's the overall average of our 8 parameters, and it's right at this dividing line between acceptable and unacceptable. And you know, we see that in the return of fish and everything else in the river. It's just an amazing story of success. Next slide. Well, I'm going to run through these a little faster, but we look at the tributaries as well. Here I said that what we see downriver is a function of tributary additions or infiltration. Well, in the Ohio River, if I go up and down the Ohio River and sum up all the tributaries that are monitored, it almost equals the discharge of the river. It's very interesting for the Ohio, but we don't have any streams monitored going into the river. But here's conductivity. Here's our 700, and you'll notice that sites are quite high. Here's the effluent coming in from the East Fork of the Mill Creek at mile 19, and it looks like it's somewhat high in the other tribs coming downriver. We also have high pollution in West Fork Creek, which is kind of interesting. This over here, however, you might recognize as Lick Run. Lick Run is our other huge success story by MSD. They put in, they noticed the hillsides of Lick Run are wooded. And they said, the water running off those is pretty good. Well, let's collect it and put it into an open stream. And they did. And they did sewer separation, so the sewage still goes into the 19-foot diameter sewer pipe, and it will overflow occasionally, but very infrequently. And the water going down the Lick Run Creek meets the Clean Water Act standard in 2022. Good news. I mean, it's just amazing that you segregate the polluted areas from the unpolluted areas and you get good water. Moreover, on the upstream of the Lick Run, if you have to go up, you have to go up past the last pond, Sunset, and go back a little dirt road. There's a mile of upper Lick Run, which has been daylighted completely with 3 ponds as well. Very healthy. And if you go up Quebec Avenue, there's an inflow from a forested area that's soon going to become a new city park, and it is also daylighted. So they've daylighted 2 additional streams that they take very little credit for, and they've improved by separation of sewage from good water. They've made a good water stream coming into the Mill Creek, which is this site right here. It's not over 700. The upstream sites are pretty good. Next slide. The pH, here's our 8.3 way up here, and almost all the sites for the tributaries are under that 8.3. There are no real problems. Here's the West Fork Creek in here is high, and these are the areas below the sewage plant. Next slide. Here's the average turbidity from the tribs. You'll notice this big spike in turbidity that we saw in the main stem is not in the tributaries of Union Center Boulevard. So as Sherman pointed out, it may be coming from the development on the Mill Creek itself that's not being mitigated. It's very interesting because Butler County, at the start of the environmental movement, had a rigorous 65-foot setback from the stream, and you couldn't channelize the stream. You had to leave it as a natural stream. They've obviously thrown that out in Butler County because that stream was a straightened ditch that we just saw a picture of in Sherman's pictures. But you'll notice that the turbidity is not a problem. Next slide. Total phosphorus, here's our 0.1, and here's this is the West Fork of the Mill Creek. Well, no, it isn't really. Yeah, it's West Fork of the Mill Creek. Here's the sewage plant in here. These are the tribs that are coming out of the West Fork of the Mill Creek. Here's, and Cooper Creek is in here. Here's the Lick Run project. This is West Fork Creek, as you can see here. You'll be able to, but you'll notice the concentration of phosphorus in the tribs is 0.33, not 0.53. So the tribs are in better shape than the main stem of the river. Next slide. If we do nitrate, here's the 1 milligram per liter. Most of the tribs are under 1 milligram per liter too. You can see Town Run and the trib and unfortunately for Gorman Heritage Farms, you still got a nitrogen problem. It's been there for the past couple of years. God bless you if you can get that under control. I don't know if it's ag waste or manure, but you've been up there on that list for quite a while. Next slide. E. coli, here's our 1,000, here's our 106. This is swimmable, fishable. The only river in our area that's swimmable, fishable is the Whitewater River, categorically. So if you go out to Lutz's Canoe Rental, they rent about 1,200 kayaks on a busy weekend, and people do go swimming in it. You can swim in it. The Little Miami and the Mill Creek, you shouldn't be swimming in on most days. There are a few days in late summer at low flow when the water is green, when it's probably safe. But the old adage is if the water's brown, don't get in it. If the water's green, it's photooxidative, it's probably safe. So here's the E. coli, and you can see here's Cooper Creek. That has never been up there that high before, because this is one that Hamilton County, Soil and Water is working on. But way over here is our Lick Run project, well under the 1030. Next slide. Chlorophyll A, nowhere near 30. All of the average is 1.95, even less than the river. The chlorophyll was not a problem in the Mill Creek or its tributaries. Next slide. The whiteners, here's our value of 20. We like to see them under that. Only a few tribs, Town Run at Canal, trib at Beaver Run, apartments that's one of our volunteers takes is a little bit high for whiteners. I don't know if that apartment complex is used as a solo sewer system or not. Here's a West Fork at Beekman, but most of them are doing well. Next slide is the water quality tribs of the water quality rank of the tribs. Blue, remember, is excellent. Green is good. All of these meet Clean Water Act standards. Almost all the tribs meet the Clean Water Act standards, except for Beaver Run and Town Run and the West Fork Creek. Yep. Yes. Yeah, there is one other sewage plant on the river, but Town Run is kind of a tertiary treatment for that plant. And by the time it gets to the river, I don't think it's a big problem. They're small, less than 10 million gallons a day. Next slide. And here's the water quality standard. Can you move that bar? Oh, okay. Well, this is conductivity. Whoop, go back. This is conductivity over here, and you can see that it's in problem. And here's total phosphorus, and here's nitrate, or is that whiteners? That's whiteners, I guess. So it's this kind of the same three things that were a problem in the main stem of the Mill Creek are problems in the tributaries as well. The average, though, is well above 3.5, so they're doing pretty well. Next slide is putting these on a lat long. This is longitude, this is latitude, and this is the main stem of the Mill Creek. And you go up, you see some green and then some yellow up at to the sewer plant, and then you go into Union Center Boulevard and up into Mason, and it turns green again. This is a pattern that looked almost exactly like what MBI found in their 2021 survey as well. What we're trying to do is relate our data, volunteer data collected every year, with data that are collected every 5 years at the moment. And once the consent decree is over, the state won't be doing it except once every 12 years. So the state of Ohio's Division of Surface Water is so restricted by budget that they're cutting back the number of samples and the frequency of sampling. So volunteer measurements like ours may become more important in the future. Next slide. The conclusions are up here. Phosphorus is high, 0.52. That's 5 times higher than we'd like to see it. We need to do something about it. The sources, as I say, are largely urban. They're not just a sewage plant. We've got to understand more about the influence of groundwater. You know, as we come down the river, we get out of a bedrock and into a gravel bed. You recall that the Licking River used to come up the Mill Creek during the Taze River drainage, and there's a lot of rock down there. And you know, when Cincinnati was founded, downtown you could drill a hole and the water shot up 6.5 feet out of the ground because everything was charged with water coming out of the hills, and we had a positive head. There was no trouble with water in the early days. Conductivity was very high. It's high because it's likely contributing to the stasis of the IBI scores found in the MBI data. The MBI data for fish did not go up in 2021. They're good, but they didn't improve a whole lot. Detergent whiteners have been high for the past 2 years, and we don't know why. It looks like more of it's getting through a sewage plant some of the time. I don't know if they've changed their system or what. The tributaries in the upper reaches of the Ohio backwater were in better condition for their water chemistry than the mid-creek sites. So this is just to say that up there in Union Center Boulevard, they did pretty good. When we compute the load at each site, the average sample flow, the contribution of N&P and conductivity from the Upper Mill Creek water reclamation facility become less important. How do we compute a load with a few USGS sites? We did this back in 2000. We went up and down the creek, and at 10 sites, we did the cross-sectional area, the wetted perimeter, the flow rate across it for the base flow, for the bank full flow, and for the flood flow. And so, you know, we can generate those kind of data from dry labbing to look at this problem of the increasing load downriver. But it's kind of a new question for this year that I'm throwing out to MSD and to everybody to consider when looking at loads in rivers. We've always done it just from Carthage or just from Milford or just from Hamilton, where we have 3 monitoring stations for the system that we measure. What we do, what you do, you volunteers, you know, it may be a little boring sitting over a conductivity meter 3 hours a month, but it's, you know, collectively what we're doing is mind-boggling, really. We're making a difference, and, you know, people are beginning to listen. We've got a compassionate public now, and things that Sherman T. Spoke about now, you know, we discuss at home routinely. It's an amazing transformation, and with that, I end. Thank you.
Just a few comments before we take some questions here from the live audience and from folks in the chat on Zoom. Few up-and-coming events for the Mill Creek Alliance. We're harvesting live stakes this coming weekend. These are willow cuttings that can be planted in stream banks and used to reforest and revegetate and hold some of that sediment in place. We're going to have plantings of those live stakes, both right away on Sunday, March 5th, and also a little bit later in the month on March 18th. As most of you know, our first water quality monitoring sampling day is coming up fast, on March 11th. And Audra and her army are ready for that. Our annual Mill Creek Valley Cleanup by Canoe is going to be April 21st, the day before Earth Day. The Mill Creek Yacht Club, host of volunteers, are going to be coming down the stream in many different areas by canoe and grabbing as much stuff out of it as humanly possible. We have our first urban stream adventure, our first public paddling outing of the year will be on Saturday, May 20th. And last but not least, our 4th annual Canoes and Conversations, our big gathering of elected officials and administrators and community leaders and business leaders, which has grown by leaps and bounds every year, is going to be held on June 17th down at the Barrier Dam area on the lower Mill Creek with tremendous sponsorship from MSD and from Duke Energy. All of these events are on our website. You can go and take a look at those and register for them and get a whole lot more information. So Johnny, if you'll cut off the share and we'll go back to the live pictures. We have a couple questions. Mike, if you want to come back up, these are for you. Yeah, if somebody could hit the lights back there, it would probably be good too. So some questions from the folks on Zoom. We'll lead off with those. Dr. Miller, to improve the quality and health of Mill Creek, what can individuals do? Less salt, less fertilizer, less detergent, more rain gardens, rain barrels? What are your suggestions?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All of the above?
All of the above, yeah. Cut your grass at 3 inches plus, mulch it, don't fertilize it. If you're going to fertilize it, a little nitrogen once a year to start the growing season, but not if it's going to rain. Keep it on, you know, that's the best way. Most of the lawns that are put in are spray-on lawns. They just spray it on over clay, and they seldom put the dirt down. And what you want to do is put that mulch in and develop an organic layer under the mat, and it's going to hold nutrients, and it's going to make the runoff a lot lower and a lot better water quality. So yes, and of course use as little salt as you can on stairs, but try shoveling the other parts of your yard. This salt problem, I mean, the city is very responsible. I don't know if you've looked at their webpage, but they really have a huge format of what they do with different temperatures and different kinds of snow now as their pre-treatment and their post-treatment for ice. Go ahead.
Yeah. Another question. If we could eliminate the 5 worst days per year for example, high runoff, sewage overflows, et cetera, how much would that alone improve the health of Mill Creek?
Not so much. This is, I'm going to give Chris credit on this. He's pointed out that the MSD consent decree has done a great job of eliminating sanitary sewer overflows and reducing the E. coli coming out of the line sewer overflows. And those large events are pretty harmless in the spring. It's the bad events of the 7-day, 10-year low flow that are critical to a stream. And those low flow events are the ones that MDI measures mostly in their summer monitoring program. So the high events are not damaging. The high events are not as damaging to the stream per se. We haven't had a big event since May 19, 2019, and that was a big event. We're due for a big event. We're overdue for some really damaging floods at some point because everybody around us has been getting them, but we haven't. And, you know, we're going to get one, but that's going to be damage to riparian zone and to the stream bottom. It will set, I've seen events that have wiped out 99% of the macroinvertebrates coming down the upper Mill Creek, and they can be devastating. But in the period when those events occur, usually March, April, and May, the bugs aren't out yet. They've got to emerge. They've got to lay eggs. The eggs have to hatch, and they're not in a vulnerable condition until later in the season.
Okay. Do we have any questions from folks here in the live audience? Yeah. Nicole, there in the back. Sir, right here in front. Mike, you've got to be over here or they can't hear you on TV.
Ah. Absolutely. Well, we haven't done much. MSD is the only one that's done that. They've done some source tracking on Duck Creek that I'm aware of, and they got a few dogs. They didn't get any cattle or pigs. Most of it was human. You know, we're the big supplier of E. coli in urban areas. You can get cases on beachfront properties on the on lakes where the Canada geese are a problem, but you know, they're beach specific. They're local areas. They're not as general as what we're seeing here. It's human.
Other questions from here in the live audience? No? All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our program. We have one more question coming in on the chat. Hang on. Gotcha. Linda's trying to get it to me. Okay. Mike, regarding the invasive species, apart from honeysuckle, are there methods, projects, and education for mitigating and creating a healthier ecosystem?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Bernie's back there. He's been out there planting trees the last 5 days. They're doing 10,000 trees on our streams in southwest Ohio. For example, you know, the planting trees as a way of stabilizing banks in the riparian zone, and the interception of water on leaves can reduce the rainfall through flow by about 20%. That evaporates back out. It falls through the leaves to the soil. The roots allow the infiltration of the water into the water table, and so planting trees is probably the single biggest thing we can do in low-lying wetland areas and riparian zones, both to fight invasives, which probably have to be removed before you can get them there.
I'll also point out that Bennett Kotler, our restoration manager, frequently leads what we call work parties in the watershed, where we bring in lots of volunteers, hint, hint, who murder in a lot of bush honeysuckle and other invasive species, and then plant native species, both trees, shrubs, wildflowers, to revegetate those banks. So it's something you can all help us out with if you have an inclination and a free Saturday. All right. Sir, right in front. One second. The question from the audience, for those on Zoom, is whether an increase in setbacks and improvement of riparian zones would cut down on the conductivity, on the amount of salts that are getting in the stream.
And the answer is no. You know, there's no real biological use except for minor amounts of sodium and chloride. It's not a macronutrient for anything biological, and it's not sequestered by anything. It's just a problem. We just have to reduce the use of it. You know, we mine most of the salt that's used in this country under Lake Erie, right up here in Cleveland. There are huge salt beds from buried seas underneath of the lake, and they drive trucks in to pull this stuff out, and it gets deposited up and down the river. It's absolutely unregulated in most rural areas that aren't zoned, and it has, in fact, contaminated water supplies in wells in Ohio towns where they don't regulate the salt. In the city, the salt has to be on cement or inside of a building because we zone it that way. But if it's unzoned, they can just pile it up, and it can infiltrate into the groundwater and into the aquifer.
Okay. Other questions? Yes. The question is there a reason we're not doing any sampling or testing of dissolved oxygen?
Yeah, we'd love to, but dissolved oxygen requires that each person in the field have a meter, and it be calibrated correctly. So we're going to have 17 meters out there that have to be calibrated. We've got one person. You know, it's just yeah. What we would like to see is a continuous sonde at the base of each of our rivers, the Whitewater, the Great Miami, the Mill Creek, and the Little Miami, to monitor what's going on. Now, we have put series of sondes by the Little Miami Conservancy District. They've used a series of sondes on the river for 2 years, I think 5 of them, on the Little Miami. But it's amazing how little data you get for upstream, downstream, and other things. The only thing that it gives you is that summertime variation, and it's got to be continuous because we're out there 9 days a year, and most of them it's not raining and it's not flowing fast. And so the oxygen problems occur at low flow, and the only way to get to that's with continuous monitoring.
Other questions? All right. Well, folks, I think that is going to bring us to a close here for the program tonight. again, I very much want to thank Gorman Heritage Farm for hosting us tonight. I want to thank all of our staff and interns and volunteers, and especially Audra for the immense amount of work that she put in, Linda as well for pulling this together. And I want to thank Bridget, Tim for their comments about why they value their participation in our water quality monitoring program. And I especially want to thank Sean for his very powerful testimony of what the Mill Creek has meant to him and the improvements that he's seeing in it. And, you know, that's the bottom line. You know, the work that we're all doing, it's paying off. And Sean is seeing it every day on the end of his rod and reel. And that's what we want to continue. So with your help, we will. Thanks.
One comment, if I can. Yeah, I just gave a talk on the Great Miami this morning, and this one on the Little Miami, or on the Mill Creek. We're just starting the Little Miami project again. We hope this year, courtesy of MSD and other funders, and that will probably start in July or August. So we may need volunteers that live on the Little Miami to start resampling that. That program began in 2003, and I'm just putting a plug in for it. And on Friday, 9:30 to 11, I'll be speaking about the Great Miami River 2022 to the Regional Watershed Network on Zoom that you can get hold of through Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation Division.
And I think Audra has a comment. If there are any samplers on Zoom who have not picked up their coolers yet, you need to call Audra. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I can't thank you enough for all your help and for being here tonight. Thank you for all your good work.